There is a quiet invitation being whispered to you in every moment of your life, an invitation so subtle that it is often drowned out by the noise of worry, planning, regret, and anticipation. It is the invitation to trust. Not a shallow optimism, not a denial of pain or challenge, but a deep, grounded trust in the intelligence that breathes you, the same intelligence that turns seeds into forests and night skies into dawn. When you begin to act as if everything always works out for you, something within your nervous system relaxes, something ancient and wise recognizes a familiar truth, and you step back into alignment with the flow that has always been carrying you. Most of us were taught, consciously or unconsciously, to brace ourselves against life. We learn to anticipate disappointment, to armor our hearts, to manage outcomes before they arrive, as if vigilance itself were a form of safety. Yet the very act of bracing creates the tension we are trying to avoid. It is like gripping the steering wheel so tightly that you forget to enjoy the journey, or holding your breath while waiting for the wave to pass, not realizing that breathing is what allows you to float. Acting as if everything works out is not a strategy to manipulate reality. It is a return to a natural state of trust that dissolves resistance and allows life to move through you with grace. Notice how much energy is consumed by trying to control what has not yet happened. The mind runs ahead of the moment, rehearsing conversations, defending against imagined losses, reliving old mistakes as if they were happening now. But the soul does not live in rehearsal or replay. The soul lives here, right now. And in this moment, you are safe enough to breathe, aware enough to notice, alive enough to choose a different relationship with your thoughts. When you act as if everything works out, you gently escort your attention back to the present, where life actually unfolds and where solutions arise naturally, without force. There is a profound difference between effort and strain. Effort aligned with trust feels purposeful, energized, and calm. Strain is effort contaminated by fear. When you believe that life is against you, every step feels heavy. Every decision carries the burden of proving your worth or securing your future. But when you act as if life is on your side, effort becomes playful, creative, and inspired. You still show up. You still take action. Yet the action flows from confidence rather than desperation, from curiosity rather than panic. You move because you are guided, not because you are chased. Think of the times in your life when things unexpectedly fell into place, when a closed door redirected you towards something richer, when a loss revealed a deeper strength you did not know you possessed. At the time, the experience may have felt confusing or even painful, but looking back, you can often see a hidden order, a quiet intelligence orchestrating growth beneath the surface. Acting as if everything works out is not pretending that challenges will not arise. It is trusting that challenges, too, are part of the curriculum of awakening, shaping you into a fuller expression of who you are meant to be. The ego thrives on doubt because doubt keeps it in control. It insists on proof before peace, certainty before surrender. The ego says, trust when you see results. The soul whispers, see results when you trust. This is the great reversal, the gentle paradox at the heart of spiritual living. When you wait for life to prove itself before you relax, you remain trapped in conditional peace. But when you relax first, when you choose trust as an inner posture rather than an outer reward, life responds in ways that feel almost miraculous. Not because the universe has changed, but because you have stopped blocking its natural flow. Acting as if everything works out begins with a subtle shift in language, both spoken and internal. Notice the difference between, I hope this works, and I wonder how this will work out. One carries tension, the other carries openness. One braces for disappointment, the other invites discovery. Words are not just sounds, they are carriers of belief, shaping the lens through which you perceive experience. When you speak to yourself with trust, your body listens, your nervous system responds, and your perception sharpens, allowing you to notice opportunities that fear would have obscured. There is a rhythm to life that cannot be rushed, only respected. Seeds do not bloom the moment they are planted. Rivers do not force their way to the ocean. They flow around obstacles, trusting gravity to guide them home. When you act as if everything works out, you align yourself with this rhythm. You stop demanding immediate answers and start allowing unfolding. You replace impatience with presence, urgency with attentiveness. In doing so, you discover that clarity often arrives not when you chase it, but when you create enough inner space for it to emerge. So much suffering comes from arguing with what is. The mind says this should not be happening, while life says this is happening. Acting as if everything works out does not mean approving of pain or injustice. It means acknowledging reality as it is, without layering it with unnecessary resistance. From acceptance arises intelligent action. From resistance arises exhaustion. When you stop fighting the present, you free your energy to respond creatively, compassionately, and effectively. Acceptance is not resignation. It is the foundation of transformation. Trusting life requires a willingness to loosen your grip on the past. The past, after all, exists only as memory, a story replayed in the present. Yet many people allow old wounds, regrets, and identities to dictate their expectations of the future. Acting as if everything works out invites you to release the need to let yesterday define today. It reminds you that you are not your history, you are the awareness witnessing it. In this awareness, new choices become possible, and old narratives gently dissolve, making room for growth. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to express it. The need to control outcomes often stems from a hidden belief that your value is conditional, that you must earn your place in the flow of life. But the truth is simpler and far more liberating. You belong by virtue of being alive. Acting as if everything works out is a way of honoring this truth. It is a declaration, spoken silently through your attitude, that you trust your right to be here, to learn, to evolve, to receive. When challenges arise, as they inevitably will, notice how trust changes your relationship with them. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you might ask, "What is this asking of me?" The first question tightens the heart. The second opens it. The first isolates you. The second connects you to purpose. Acting as if everything works out transforms obstacles into teachers, setbacks into redirections, and uncertainty into a field of possibility. You begin to sense that life is not punishing you, but refining you. There is a deep peace that comes from knowing you do not have to micromanage the universe. You do your part with integrity and presence, and then you allow the rest to unfold. This is the art of cooperation with life rather than domination over it. When you act as if everything works out, you move from a posture of defense to one of dialogue. You listen for guidance in intuition, in synchronicity, in the quiet nudges that arise when the mind is still enough to hear them. Trust is not passive. It is deeply engaged. It asks you to show up fully, to align your actions with your values, to speak your truth, and then to release attachment to specific results. Attachment narrows your vision. Trust expands it. When you release the need to control how things unfold, you often find that outcomes exceed your expectations, arriving in forms you could not have planned, yet recognize immediately as right. Imagine what your life would feel like if you approached each day with the assumption that it is conspiring in your favor. How would you walk, speak, decide, relate? How much lighter would your body feel if you stopped carrying the invisible weight of constant anticipation? Acting as if everything works out is an experiment in freedom, an invitation to test the possibility that peace is available now, not later, and that confidence does not require certainty. The mind will protest, of course. It will list reasons why trust is risky, why vigilance is necessary, why relaxation invites disappointment. Thank the mind for its concern, and then gently choose otherwise. You are not required to believe every thought you think. You are free to observe thoughts, to question them, to let them pass like clouds across the sky of awareness. Trust grows not by eliminating fear, but by choosing presence in its midst. As you practice acting as if everything works out, you may notice subtle shifts. Conversations become easier. Decisions feel clearer. Opportunities arise without strain. Even when outcomes differ from your preferences, you meet them with resilience rather than collapse. This is not because life has become predictable, but because you have become grounded. You have anchored your sense of well-being in something deeper than circumstances, something stable and enduring. At the heart of this practice is a recognition of your spiritual identity. You are not merely a body navigating events. You are an expression of the same creative intelligence that animates all of life. When you trust life, you are trusting yourself at the deepest level, trusting the wisdom that brought you here and continues to guide you moment by moment. Acting as if everything works out is an affirmation of this connection, a quiet yes to the unfolding mystery. So allow yourself to relax into the unknown. Let go of the need to have it all figured out. Breathe into the present moment and feel the support beneath you, the unseen currents carrying you forward. Act as if everything works out, not because you are certain of the path, but because you trust the process of walking it. In this trust, you discover that life is not something happening to you, but something happening through you, and that you are, and always have been, held. And as you continue to rest in this understanding, something even more subtle begins to reveal itself. You notice that trust is not something you force into existence, it is something you remember. It is a remembering of how you once moved through the world before fear taught you to contract, before doubt taught you to second-guess your own inner guidance. Trust feels familiar because it is native to your soul. It is the natural state of a being that knows it is connected to something vast, intelligent, and benevolent. When you act as if everything always works out for you, you stop negotiating with life from a place of scarcity. You no longer say, "I will trust when I feel safe," because you realize safety does not come from controlling the outer world. It comes from knowing that whatever arises, you have the inner resources to meet it. This knowing does not shout. It does not need to convince anyone. It sits quietly beneath the noise of thought, steady and unshaken, like the ocean floor beneath the waves. There is a profound liberation in releasing the idea that you must anticipate every possible outcome in order to survive. Anticipation is a form of living ahead of yourself, and life cannot meet you there. Life only meets you where you are. When you return to the now, when you soften your focus and inhabit this moment fully, you discover that what you truly need is almost always available. Breath is here, awareness is here, choice is here. And from this place, trust becomes less of a belief and more of an experience. You may notice that the more you trust, the less reactive you become. Situations that once triggered anxiety or defensiveness now invite curiosity. Instead of tightening, you open. Instead of resisting, you inquire. This openness is not weakness. It is strength without armor. It allows you to respond from clarity rather than conditioning, from wisdom rather than habit. Acting as if everything works out gently dismantles the reflex to protect yourself from life and replaces it with a willingness to participate in it fully. Consider how often you have mistaken tension for responsibility. You believed that worrying was a sign of caring, that stress was proof of commitment. But life does not require your suffering to function properly. The universe does not ask you to exhaust yourself in order to be worthy of support. When you act as if everything works out, you give yourself permission to care deeply without carrying the burden of control. You learn to hold intention lightly, like a bird resting in your open palm, rather than gripping it so tightly that it cannot breathe. This way of being transforms how you relate to uncertainty. Instead of viewing the unknown as a threat, you begin to see it as a creative field, rich with possibility. The unknown is not empty, it is pregnant with potential. When you trust life, you step into this field not as a fearful observer, but as a co-creator. You allow yourself to be surprised, to be guided, to be shaped by experiences that could never have been predicted by the rational mind alone. There is also a deep humility in trust. It acknowledges that your perspective, while valuable, is not the whole picture. It recognizes that life's intelligence operates on levels beyond immediate comprehension, weaving patterns across time and space that the ego cannot fully grasp. Acting as if everything works out is an act of reverence toward this larger order. It says, "I do not need to understand everything to participate meaningfully." And in this humility, you find peace. As trust deepens, you may notice an unexpected tenderness toward yourself. You stop judging your missteps so harshly because you see them as part of the unfolding, not evidence of failure. You forgive yourself more easily, recognizing that growth is not linear and that every experience contributes to your becoming. Acting as if everything works out includes trusting that even your mistakes are somehow woven into your learning, shaping wisdom that could not have been gained otherwise. This tenderness extends outward as well. When you trust life, you no longer need others to behave a certain way for you to feel secure. You release the need to control relationships, to manage perceptions, to force alignment. You allow people to be who they are, knowing that your well-being does not depend on their approval or understanding. This freedom creates space for genuine connection, grounded in authenticity rather than expectation. There is a quiet joy that arises when you stop resisting the flow of life. It is not the loud excitement of constant success, but a steady contentment rooted in acceptance. You begin to notice beauty in ordinary moments, grace in simple interactions, meaning in small gestures. Acting as if everything works out attunes you to these subtleties, reminding you that fulfillment is not postponed until conditions are perfect. It is available now, woven into the fabric of everyday experience. Trust also changes how you relate to time. You stop rushing toward the future as if it holds the key to your happiness. You stop clinging to the past as if it defines who you are. Instead, you inhabit the present with a sense of ease, aware that this moment is complete in itself. From this presence, the future unfolds naturally, informed by your choices but not constrained by your fears. When life presents challenges, as it inevitably will, trust does not mean passive acceptance of harm or injustice. It means responding without losing your center. It means taking action where action is needed, guided by clarity rather than reactivity. Acting as if everything works out gives you the inner stability to stand firm without becoming rigid, to speak truth without aggression, to engage fully without being consumed. You may find that as you embody trust, synchronicities appear more frequently. Conversations happen at just the right time. Resources show up unexpectedly. Insights arrive when you least expect them. These are not rewards for believing correctly. They are natural byproducts of alignment. When you stop blocking the flow with doubt and resistance, life moves more freely through you, arranging circumstances in ways that feel supportive and intelligent. At its core, acting as if everything always works out is an act of self-respect. It honors your capacity to adapt, to learn, to grow. It affirms that you are not fragile, even when you feel vulnerable, and that you are not alone, even when you feel uncertain. It is a way of standing in the world with quiet confidence, grounded not in egoic certainty, but in spiritual knowing. So continue to practice this gentle art, not perfectly, not rigidly, but with compassion for yourself when old patterns resurface. Each time you choose trust over fear, presence over projection, you strengthen a new way of being. Over time, this way of being becomes familiar, then natural, then effortless. You realize that life has been inviting you into this relationship all along. And in that realization, something settles. You stop waiting for permission to relax. You stop postponing peace. You act as if everything works out, not because you have been promised an easy path, but because you have discovered a deeper truth, that whatever unfolds, you are equipped to meet it, guided by a wisdom that has never left you. In this trust, you find not only calm, but freedom, and in that freedom, you remember who you are. And as this remembering deepens, you begin to sense that trust is not something you practice only when circumstances are kind. It is something you embody precisely when they are not. Trust becomes the inner posture you return to when plans unravel, when answers are delayed, when life asks you to wait in the space between knowing and not knowing. In that space, something essential is formed. Patience ripens into wisdom, uncertainty softens into openness, and you discover that the waiting itself is not empty time, but fertile ground where insight quietly takes root. There is a subtle courage required to live this way. It takes courage to release the habit of scanning the horizon for threats, to stop rehearsing disaster as a means of protection. Yet notice how exhausting that vigilance has been. Notice how it has never truly prevented pain, only prolonged it by carrying it in advance. Acting as if everything works out is a courageous decision to conserve your energy for living rather than worrying, for creating rather than defending, for loving rather than bracing. As you lean into this trust, you may notice how often your body mirrors your beliefs. When you expect life to betray you, the body tightens, breath becomes shallow, muscles brace for impact. But when you act as if life supports you, the body responds with ease. Shoulders soften, breath deepens. The nervous system shifts out of survival and into presence. This is not imagination, it is alignment. Your inner state signals to your entire being that it is safe enough to relax, safe enough to be here. Trusting life also invites you to release the illusion that you must do everything alone. There is a quiet intelligence that responds when you ask for guidance, when you listen inwardly, when you allow help to arrive in forms you did not expect. Acting as if everything works out includes trusting that support may come through other people, through unexpected insights, through moments of grace that arrive precisely when your own effort reaches its limit. You are not meant to carry the weight of existence on your shoulders. You are meant to participate in it. You may begin to see how often resistance has been mistaken for strength. True strength is flexible. It adapts. It flows. Acting as if everything works out teaches you this flexibility. When one path closes, you do not collapse, you pivot. When expectations dissolve, you do not harden, you soften. This softness is not surrender to chaos, it is cooperation with change. It allows you to move with life rather than against it, conserving energy and preserving clarity. There is also a quiet discipline in trust. It asks you to notice when the mind begins to spiral into stories of worst-case scenarios and to gently redirect attention back to what is real, what is immediate, what is workable now. Trust is not passive optimism. It is attentive presence. It is the practice of meeting each moment as it arrives without layering it with assumptions borrowed from the past or fears projected into the future. As this practice matures, you may notice a shift in how you define success. Success no longer means controlling outcomes or avoiding discomfort. It means staying aligned with your values, remaining open-hearted, and responding authentically, regardless of external results. Acting as if everything works out reframes life as a process of alignment rather than achievement. The question becomes not, did this go as planned, but did I stay present, honest, and awake within it? There is a profound relief in letting go of the need to be right about how life should unfold. When you release this need, you create space for wonder. You allow yourself to be taught by experience rather than defended against it. Acting as if everything works out opens you to the possibility that life may have more imagination than you do, that its solutions may be more elegant than anything the mind could design. This openness changes how you listen to others, to yourself, to the quiet movements of intuition. When fear quiets, guidance becomes audible. You begin to sense when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent. These cues do not arrive with drama. They come as subtle nudges, gentle inclinations that feel calm rather than urgent. Trust sharpens your sensitivity to this inner compass. You may also notice that trust dissolves the need for constant comparison. When you believe that life is working for you, you stop measuring your progress against others. You recognize that your path is unique, unfolding according to its own timing and purpose. Acting as if everything works out frees you from the pressure to keep up or prove yourself. You move at the pace that is right for you, guided by resonance rather than competition. In moments when doubt returns, as it sometimes will, meet it with kindness rather than resistance. Doubt is often a sign that something old is loosening, that a familiar identity is being challenged. Acting as if everything works out does not require you to banish doubt. It invites you to coexist with it without letting it steer. You acknowledge its presence and choose trust anyway, knowing that trust grows through repetition, not perfection. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, this way of living reshapes your inner landscape. Anxiety loses its grip. Resentment softens. Gratitude arises spontaneously, not as a forced practice, but as a natural response to feeling supported. You begin to notice how often things do, in fact, work out not always as expected, but often in ways that serve your growth, deepen your understanding, and expand your capacity to love. And then there comes a moment, quiet and unannounced, when you realize that trust is no longer something you are trying to do. It is simply how you are. You meet life with openness. You move through uncertainty with steadiness. You rest in the knowing that whatever unfolds is part of a larger movement toward wholeness. Acting as if everything works out has become less of a philosophy and more of a lived reality. In this reality, peace is no longer postponed. It is not dependent on resolution or arrival. It is present now, in the act of breathing, in the willingness to meet this moment without armor. You understand at last that trusting life is not about guaranteeing comfort. It is about discovering a freedom that remains intact regardless of circumstance. And in that freedom, you find the quiet joy of being fully alive, fully present, and deeply at home in the unfolding mystery of your own existence. There comes a moment on the inner path when you begin to notice how much of your life has been spent explaining, justifying, correcting, defending your intentions, defending your choices, defending your past, defending your worth. And if you are honest with yourself, you may realize that this habit has been so deeply woven into your identity that you no longer question it. You simply react. Someone doubts you, and your chest tightens. Someone misunderstands you, and your mind races. Someone judges you, and suddenly you feel compelled to prove something not to them, but to the invisible jury you have been carrying inside your own consciousness. And yet, the soul has never asked you to defend yourself. The soul does not argue. The soul does not explain. The soul simply is. To stop defending yourself is not an act of weakness. It is one of the most powerful spiritual decisions you can make. Because the need to defend always arises from the same illusion. The belief that who you are can be diminished by someone else's perception. The ego lives inside that illusion. It survives by comparison, by approval, by validation. It believes that worth must be negotiated, earned, protected, or explained. The soul knows something very different. The soul knows that worth is intrinsic, not conditional. It is not given, and it cannot be taken away. When you stop defending yourself, you are not giving up your power. You are reclaiming it from a world that never had the authority to define you in the first place. Think about how often arguments arise, not because truth is at stake, but because identity feels threatened. Someone challenges your view, and suddenly it feels like they are challenging you. Someone disagrees with your choice, and it feels like an attack on your intelligence, your morality, your value. But the awakened mind begins to see that disagreement is not danger. Judgment is not a verdict. Misunderstanding is not a condemnation. These are merely experiences passing through awareness. When you no longer fuse your sense of self with opinions, roles, or outcomes, you become free to observe without reacting, to listen without collapsing, to remain centered even when the world is noisy. There is a quiet dignity that emerges when you stop defending yourself. It is not arrogance. It is not indifference. It is an inner steadiness that says, I do not need to convince you of who I am because I am no longer trying to convince myself. That steadiness is the signature of higher consciousness. It comes from knowing that your essence was complete before anyone formed an opinion about you, and it will remain complete long after those opinions have dissolved into silence. When you no longer argue with reality, reality begins to cooperate with you in ways that feel almost miraculous. The universe does not respond to explanations, it responds to alignment. You can spend your life defending your actions, or you can spend it embodying your truth. One is exhausting, the other is effortless. When you live from alignment, your presence speaks louder than any justification ever could. You do not need to announce who you are. You demonstrate it through the energy you carry, the compassion you extend, the peace you refuse to surrender. This is why the wisest people often say the least. They have learned that silence, when it comes from awareness, is not emptiness, it is authority. Defensiveness is rooted in fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being rejected, fear of being unseen or unworthy. But fear dissolves in the presence of awareness. The moment you notice yourself preparing to defend, pause, breathe. Ask yourself gently, what am I afraid will happen if I don't? You may discover that what you are protecting is not your truth, but an image, not your soul, but a story. And stories, no matter how convincing, are not who you are. They are costumes consciousness wears for a while, then sets aside. To stop defending yourself is to trust that life is intelligent. It is to trust that you do not need to control how you are perceived in order to fulfill your purpose. The river does not defend its direction, it flows. The sun does not defend its brightness, it shines. The tree does not defend its growth, it grows. And you were not designed to spend your life explaining your existence. You were designed to express it. When you align with that truth, you move out of resistance and into grace. This does not mean you never speak. It means you speak from clarity, not compulsion. It means your words arise from intention, not insecurity. There is a vast difference between responding and reacting. Reaction is automatic, ego-driven, and fueled by the need to protect an identity. Response is conscious, spacious, and guided by awareness. When you stop defending yourself, you gain access to that space. You begin to choose peace over proving, understanding over winning, presence over performance. Notice how often the ego wants the last word. It believes that closure comes from being right. But the soul knows that closure comes from letting go. There are no justified resentments in higher consciousness because resentment requires a story of injury and higher consciousness sees only lessons, growth, and unfolding intelligence. When you release the need to defend, you also release the need to blame. And in that release, forgiveness becomes natural, not as a moral obligation, but as a logical consequence of understanding that nothing real has ever been threatened. The practice of not defending yourself is a form of meditation in daily life. Each interaction becomes an invitation to remain present. Each criticism becomes an opportunity to observe without attaching. Each misunderstanding becomes a reminder that your worth does not fluctuate with circumstances. This is how inner freedom is cultivated, not in isolation, but in relationship. Not by avoiding the world, but by meeting it without armor. There is a profound relief that comes when you realize you no longer have to manage your image. You no longer have to curate how you are seen. You no longer have to correct every misconception. The mind relaxes. The body softens. Energy that was once spent on self-protection becomes available for creativity, love, service, and joy. This is not a small shift. It is a radical reorientation of consciousness from self-consciousness to soul consciousness. When you live this way, something extraordinary happens. People may still judge you, but their judgments no longer hook you. They may still misunderstand you, but their misunderstandings no longer define you. And paradoxically, the less you defend yourself, the more trustworthy you appear. The less you explain, the more grounded you feel. The less you argue, the more powerful your presence becomes. This is because power does not come from persuasion. It comes from coherence, from living in harmony with who you truly are. The higher state of consciousness you step into when you stop defending yourself is not aloof or detached. It is deeply compassionate. You begin to see that others defend themselves for the same reason you once did: fear, conditioning, pain, confusion. And instead of meeting defensiveness with defensiveness, you meet it with understanding. You no longer need to win because you are no longer playing the game of validation. You are playing the game of awakening. Remember this: you are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be aligned with truth. You are not here to convince the world of your value. You are here to remember it. And when you remember, you naturally radiate a quiet confidence that does not need applause. You trust the universe not because everything goes your way, but because you know that whatever comes your way cannot diminish what you are. So the next time you feel the urge to defend yourself, see it as a gentle signal, not a command, but a reminder to return to awareness, a reminder to breathe, a reminder to choose presence over performance. Let the moment pass without resistance. Let the silence speak. Let your life, not your explanations, be the evidence of who you are. This is the freedom Wayne Dyer spoke of, the freedom that comes when you stop asking the world for permission to be yourself. When you stop defending, you stop fighting shadows. You step into alignment with a higher intelligence that has always been guiding you. And in that alignment, you discover a truth so simple and so profound that it requires no defense at all. You are already enough. You have always been enough. And nothing outside of you has ever held the authority to say otherwise. And as you remain in this space of non-defense, something subtle yet extraordinary begins to occur within you. You start to feel the difference between reacting from memory and responding from presence. Memory is heavy. It carries the weight of every past wound, every conditioned belief about how you should be seen, every learned reflex that once promised safety but now only tightens the knot inside your chest. Presence, on the other hand, is light. It has no history to protect and no future to secure. It simply allows life to move through you without obstruction. In this allowing, you discover that peace is not something you create, it is something you stop interfering with. The mind may protest at first. It may whisper that silence is surrender, that not explaining is agreement, that not correcting is failure. But these whispers are echoes of an old training, a world that taught you to equate worth with noise and strength with resistance. The deeper intelligence within you knows otherwise. It knows that true strength is spacious, not rigid. It knows that confidence does not announce itself, it radiates. When you no longer rush to clarify, justify, or persuade, you give yourself the gift of inner stillness. And from that stillness, clarity emerges on its own, unforced and precise. In this state, you begin to recognize how often defending yourself has been a way of defending the past. Old decisions, old identities, old versions of yourself that were necessary at the time but no longer reflect who you are becoming. When you stop defending, you allow yourself to evolve without apology. You stop dragging yesterday into today. You let each moment stand on its own, fresh and unburdened. This is living in the now, not as a concept, but as a felt experience where the heart is no longer braced for impact. There is also a deep humility that unfolds here, a humility that is not self-diminishing but self-liberating. You realize that you do not need to be right to be whole. You do not need to be admired to be at peace. You do not need to be agreed with to be aligned. Humility, in its highest form, is the willingness to let life be larger than your personal narrative. It is the quiet acceptance that every person you encounter is seeing the world through a lens shaped by their own history, fears, and hopes, and that none of those lenses have the power to alter your essence. As this understanding deepens, forgiveness ceases to be an effort and becomes a natural movement of consciousness. You forgive not because others deserve it, but because you no longer wish to carry what does not belong to you. You see that holding on to the need to defend keeps you tethered to the very energies you long to be free from. Releasing that need is an act of self-respect. It is saying gently and firmly, I choose peace over proving. And in that choice, the body relaxes, the breath deepens, and the nervous system finally receives the message that it is safe to rest. From here, life begins to meet you differently. Conversations soften, conflicts lose their charge. Even when disagreement arises, it no longer feels personal. It feels informational. You listen more deeply because you are no longer listening for threats. You speak more clearly because your words are no longer filtered through fear. And when silence comes, it feels rich rather than awkward, full rather than empty. Silence becomes a companion, a reminder that truth does not require volume. You may notice that the universe mirrors this inner shift in unexpected ways. Opportunities appear without struggle. Support arrives without solicitation. Guidance becomes more intuitive, less analytical. This is not coincidence, it is resonance. When you stop broadcasting defensiveness, you stop attracting situations that require it. You begin to live in harmony with a higher order one that does not test you through opposition, but teaches you through alignment. At this level of awareness, you understand that your life is not a courtroom where you must continually present evidence of your goodness, intelligence, or worth. It is a classroom, a sanctuary, a field of experience designed to awaken you to who you are beyond roles and labels. And the lesson is always the same, though it arrives in countless forms. Nothing real needs to be defended. Truth stands on its own. Love explains itself. Being requires no justification. So you walk forward now with a lighter step, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You trust the intelligence that breathes you, guides you, and unfolds your path with quiet precision. You let go of the impulse to manage how you are received, and in doing so, you finally receive yourself. This is the higher state of consciousness you step into, not elevated above others, but rooted more deeply in what is timeless, compassionate, and free. And in this freedom, you discover the simplest, most transformative realization of all. When you no longer defend yourself, you are no longer at war with life. You are in dialogue with it. You listen, you respond, you grow. You live not as an argument to be proven, but as a presence to be felt. And that presence, calm, awake, and quietly powerful, becomes your greatest contribution to the world. And as this presence stabilizes within you, you begin to sense a deeper reorientation taking place. Not dramatic, not announced, but unmistakable. It is as though the center of gravity within your being has shifted from the outer world to the inner landscape, where once you scanned faces for approval, tones for validation, outcomes for reassurance, you now rest in a quieter knowing. You are no longer negotiating your existence moment by moment. You are inhabiting it. This is the subtle liberation that comes when identity loosens its grip and awareness takes the lead. You may notice how time itself feels different here. Urgency fades. The need to rush toward resolution dissolves. When you stop defending yourself, you step out of the illusion that something essential is always at risk. You begin to understand that life is not an exam you can fail, nor a performance you must perfect. It is a process of remembering again and again that you are participating in something far more intelligent than the thinking mind. This remembrance softens the edges of experience. Even uncertainty becomes less threatening when you trust that you are held by a larger order. In this space, you also start to recognize how much energy has been reclaimed. Energy that was once bound up in rehearsing conversations, anticipating criticism, replaying misunderstandings. That energy returns to you now as vitality, creativity, and quiet joy. You feel more available not just to others, but to yourself. You listen inwardly with the same compassion you once reserved for defending outwardly. And in that listening, you hear guidance that does not shout, does not argue, does not insist, it simply invites. The ego may still appear from time to time, as it always does. Old reflexes may surface. The impulse to explain may rise, but now there is space around it. You do not shame it or suppress it. You observe it with kindness, understanding that it once served a purpose, and because you no longer identify with it, it loses its authority. Awareness watches. Choice returns. This is not perfection. This is mastery, gentle, patient, and profoundly human. As you continue living from this place, relationships transform, some deepen, some dissolve, some rearrange themselves in ways that feel both surprising and inevitable. You no longer cling to being understood. You value resonance over agreement. You discover that true connection does not come from convincing another of your truth, but from meeting them as they are, without armor, without agenda. And when connection is not possible, you release it without bitterness, trusting that alignment is always kinder than attachment. There is also a growing intimacy with life itself. Ordinary moments become luminous. A breath, a pause, a simple exchange carries a quiet richness that once went unnoticed. This is because you are no longer split, part of you present, part of you defending. You are whole in the moment. And wholeness has a way of revealing beauty where the fragmented mind once saw only problems to solve. Gradually, you realize that the practice of not defending yourself has become a way of being. It is no longer something you remember to do. It is something you naturally embody. You move through the world with an ease that does not depend on circumstances. Challenges still arise, but they do not destabilize you. Praise may come, but it does not inflate you. Criticism may appear, but it does not define you. You remain centered, not because you are unaffected, but because you are anchored in something deeper than reaction. And from this anchoring, trust blossoms, not blind optimism, but a steady confidence in the unfolding intelligence of life. You trust that what needs to be said will be said. What needs to be clarified will clarify itself. What needs to fall away will do so without force. You trust that your path does not require constant defense because it is guided by a wisdom that does not make mistakes, even when it uses experiences you once labeled as wrong. So you continue gently and deliberately, choosing awareness over argument, presence over protection, truth over tension. You let your life speak in the language of alignment, and as you do, you discover that the quiet confidence you now carry is not something you created, it is something you allowed. It was always there, waiting beneath the noise, waiting for you to stop defending, stop proving, stop bracing, and simply be. And with this balance restored, you begin to sense that life is no longer pushing against you, nor are you pushing against it. There is a rhythm now, subtle, intelligent, trustworthy. You move with it rather than against it. Decisions arise with less struggle. You no longer need to force certainty before taking a step, because you have learned that clarity often follows movement, not the other way around. When you are not defending yourself, you are not frozen in self-doubt. You are responsive, fluid, alive. There is a new relationship with uncertainty that develops here. What once felt like danger now feels like openness. You understand that uncertainty is not the absence of guidance, but the presence of possibility. The mind prefers fixed answers because it seeks control, but the soul thrives in openness because it trusts direction. When you stop defending, you stop clinging to rigid positions. You allow yourself to be taught by experience rather than threatened by it. Life becomes a dialogue instead of a debate. This balance also reveals itself in how you relate to success and failure. Neither one defines you anymore. Achievement no longer inflates your sense of self, and setbacks no longer diminish it. You see both as movements within a larger unfolding waves on the surface of something much deeper and more stable. This stability does not come from certainty about outcomes. It comes from certainty about being. You know who you are, beyond roles, beyond results, beyond recognition, and that knowing cannot be shaken. As this understanding matures, compassion expands naturally. You see how many people are still exhausting themselves, trying to be seen, trying to be right, trying to be safe through defense. You recognize the tension in their words, the urgency in their reactions, the fear beneath their arguments, and instead of meeting that fear with resistance, you meet it with presence. You listen without needing to fix. You speak without needing to dominate. Sometimes you say nothing at all, allowing your calm to do the work that words cannot. There is a quiet courage required to live this way. It takes courage to remain open in a world that rewards defensiveness. It takes courage to be still when others are reactive, to be grounded when others are restless, to be silent when others demand explanation. But this courage is not effortful. It does not come from willpower. It comes from alignment, from standing in a truth that does not need reinforcement. Once you taste this kind of courage, you recognize it as strength without aggression, confidence without comparison. Gradually, the need to manage how you are perceived fades into the background of your awareness. You are no longer preoccupied with the story others are telling about you. You are engaged with the life you are actually living. Attention returns to the present moment, where power has always resided. You realize that defending yourself was never about protection, it was about distraction. And now that the distraction has fallen away, what remains is a direct, intimate connection with life itself. This is where balance reveals its deeper meaning. Not neutrality, not detachment, but integration. Mind and heart working together, action informed by awareness, stillness alive with movement. You do not retreat from the world, nor do you lose yourself in it. You participate fully without losing your center. You care deeply without clinging. You engage honestly without armoring. This is the equilibrium of awakened living. And in this equilibrium, something settles permanently within you. A quiet trust. Not that everything will go as planned, but that whatever unfolds will contribute to your awakening. You trust that you do not need to defend your path because it is uniquely yours. You trust that life knows what it is doing, even when the mind does not. You trust yourself, not the constructed self that seeks approval, but the deeper self that observes, learns, and grows through every experience. So you continue forward, not striving, not proving, not resisting. You move with a steady openness, allowing life to reveal itself step by step. You are no longer defined by reaction, nor driven by fear. You are guided by awareness, grounded in being, and balanced between heaven and earth, fully human, deeply conscious, and quietly free. And now, as this understanding settles into the deepest chambers of your being, you may notice a stillness that feels unfamiliar yet profoundly intimate. It is the stillness that comes when nothing inside you is arguing with the moment. You are not rehearsing explanations. You are not anticipating defense. You are not bracing for impact. You are simply here. And in this here-ness, you realize that peace was never something missing from your life. It was something waiting for you to stop interrupting it. You begin to sense that life has always been inviting you into this simplicity. Not a simplicity of circumstances, but a simplicity of relationship with yourself. When you no longer stand guard over an identity, you discover that awareness itself is enough. It holds joy without grasping, sorrow without drowning, love without fear. You no longer need to armor your heart, because you are no longer mistaking vulnerability for danger. Openness becomes natural when you trust the intelligence that lives beneath every breath. There is a gentleness now in how you move through the world. You listen with your whole being. You speak with care, not calculation. You allow others their opinions without absorbing them as truth. You have learned that you do not need to resist what is false when you are anchored in what is real. Truth does not compete. It does not shout. It does not defend itself. It simply remains steady, luminous, undeniable. And in this remaining, you touch something timeless within yourself, a presence that existed before you learned to explain yourself, before you learned to perform, before you learned to protect. This presence has watched every chapter of your life unfold with infinite patience. It has never doubted your worth. It has never questioned your belonging. It has always known that you were enough, not because of what you do, but because of what you are. From this place, gratitude arises effortlessly. Not gratitude for perfection, but gratitude for participation, for being alive in a universe that is constantly offering you opportunities to remember who you are. Even the moments that once felt adversarial now reveal their hidden gift. They taught you the cost of self-defense and the freedom of self-trust. They guided you gently and persistently back to yourself. You may still encounter noise. The world will not suddenly become quiet, but you have changed how you meet it. You no longer take its turbulence personally. You no longer confuse its opinions with your essence. You stand rooted while life moves around you, like a tree that does not argue with the wind. You sway when needed. You remain when needed. You trust your roots. And so you live now with a quiet confidence that needs no audience. You act from purpose rather than pressure. You allow life to unfold without constant commentary. You know when to speak, when to listen, and when to let silence carry the wisdom that words cannot. This is not withdrawal from life. This is intimacy with it. As you continue on your path, remember this gentle truth. The universe does not require your defense. Your soul does not require your explanation. You are not here to prove your value. You are here to express it. When you stop defending yourself, you stop fragmenting your energy. You gather yourself back into wholeness. And in that wholeness, you become a quiet blessing to yourself, to others, and to the unfolding world. Let this be the way you walk forward now. Not guarded, not hardened, not reactive, but awake. Awake to the intelligence that guides you. Awake to the peace that lives beneath every moment. Awake to the simple, liberating realization that nothing real about you has ever been in danger. And in this awakening, you find the deepest freedom of all, the freedom to be without defense, exactly as you are.